is it fair to give a Memphis property that's not being managed by JWB the assumption that they have a 4.5-year vacancy when we know that most property managers sign 1-year leases, when we know that most property managers don't have the economies of scale for maintenance and purchasing and stuff like that JWB has for being in one market. So once again, you applied it to show a little bit better of, like if you were to adjust the different property management fees and like what you explained this to.
Well, let's go back to one more slide here because I just want to show this.
Okay.
I want to show how the JWB property compares or the recasted financials of the Dallas property and the Memphis property. And I thought this was really interesting. The Dallas property recast is 8.7%.
Yeah.
The Memphis property recast is 11.1%.
Yeah.
And Jacksonville's property is right here in the middle. This is JWB's investment properties that we're advertising right now. So I just think it's really cool for you all to see that JWB is not always going to be the winner here when we go to recast these financials, and especially if we're comparing it for different properties in different markets here. But if you can see how this Memphis property is doing it, it's that expected net rental income category. Now we need to start thinking about what is the most risky of the profit centers that I will actually see. This is where the team component comes into place.
Okay.
So now that we've recast and we've got apples to apples, now we need to think about the what ifs. Well, I can tell you that net rental income or cash flow is the most risky as to whether or not it's actually going to be delivered because it's all based on the value of that team.
Vacancy, maintenance.
Vacancy and maintenance, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So the next step that you encourage me to do is to say, what happens to these numbers if people don't invest with a vertically integrated provider like JWB, who signs long-term leases, 2- and 3-year leases, and whose average duration of residence stay is 4.5 years.
80% renewal rates.
Exactly, right? What happens? And so what I did was I started to put that into real numbers to show how these numbers would once again be recasted if I wasn't being so generous and giving them the JWB maintenance and vacancy costs.
All right, continue. So what happens if not the same low maintenance, right? So then what does you make?
So and this, you know what? I hadn't put these numbers to it in a little bit of time, but I think this is really interesting to note. Okay, you've got providers out there that are putting somewhere around 0% or 2% or 4% for maintenance costs. And very, very few out there actually sign long-term leases and have a commitment to renewals like we do. So it's very fair to assume that those maintenance costs are absolutely not accurate. I know it to be true for a lot of providers out there. It's just not accurate. Yeah. I would encourage you all to ask them where they get those maintenance numbers if you're seeing anything around 0%, 2%, 4%. But when you start to actually think about what those costs are in a percentage, for signing 1-year leases and having 1-year stays for your properties, the costs are really high. So the average cost for a property turn for a client is between $7,000 to $8,000 when it comes to maintenance cost, vacancy cost, and property management fees. And so what I did was, we know the JWB standard. We know that we sign long-term leases and we have an average duration of resident stay of 4.5 years. I know that our maintenance costs are 7.5% and 4% when it comes to a renovated property. So that's a total of 11.5%. But what happens if somebody else is having those yearly stays? Well, if you have that $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 cost every single year, your maintenance cost skyrockets to 32% maintenance and vacancy.
Maintenance, vacancy. So the repainting of the walls that you have to do inevitably, right? Like the changing out of like things that you got to do when you're turning a tenant, and the diminished rent collection that you get, and the tenant placement fee when they put in the new tenant is basically those three things, right?
Yeah, and I didn't even include the tenant placement fee here in that 32% because I was limiting it just to maintenance and vacancy cost.
Okay.
But yeah, basically what I took is 2 months of rent vacancy, so 2 months of rent, and I assumed an out-of-pocket cost of $3,500 for a property turn. And for these properties, it came out to a little bit over $7,000. And the total income from the rents each year was about $22,000.
Yep.
So boom, there's your 32% cost. Now go plug that back into those recasted pro forma.
I can do that with one button.
And this is why JWB tends to win.
Yeah.
It's because even when you recast the numbers to compare apples to apples, you'll largely find many other providers will show much bigger cash flows than JWB. But that is the easiest profit center to diminish and just vanish when you don't have a vertically integrated approach and a commitment to low maintenance and low vacancy like we do here. And unfortunately, this is more realistic what others find. If you look at the Dallas property, you were just barely breaking even on net rental income and cash flow before. And if you subscribe to, those 1-year stays, well, now you're looking at a significant loss when it comes to net rental income.
Yep.
And nobody likes that.
Plus the experience.
That's the other thing, man. Investing in real estate, it's not just the numbers, it's the experience. That's what keeps people away. And if you're getting a turn every single year, if you're allowing 1-year resident stays, it's not just the cost, it's every year when that happens in those 2 months to get it re-rented. And then in those 2 months, getting that.
Not to mention the 2 months or 3 months of, are they going to renew? Or are they
Good
not?
point,
Right? Like that conversation sucks.
100%. 100%.
Yeah.
So it's that experience component.
4 months of the year, you're like in a tough conversation with your husband or wife about it.
Mm-hmm. Right. And then what you find out is that the rest of these returns, when you're having that conversation with your husband or your wife, doesn't matter.
They don't matter.
Doesn't matter. So this is the progression of how average rental property investors wind up in a place where they're like, hey, listen, this asset class isn't right for me. The ones who have enough courage to give it a shot, they go down this path. I've just put some numbers to it, but you all know somebody, or maybe you've been down that path before and you know how this feels. You get to a place where you're like, yeah, the numbers look good, but I'm never going to get there that long because I'm not going to be in the game that long because my experience was not good enough.
Yeah. So just reminding everybody, if you want to go through this exercise, use this tool. Right now, it's not being published in public because we're still beta testing it, but the JWB team can apply this to your portfolio. They can apply this to if you are comparison shopping between a couple of properties elsewhere and properties here, or just elsewhere, right? Like bring it to the team, right? So you just got to go to either chatwithjwb.com and book a call, chatwithjwb.com. You can just calendar it right there. Or if you prefer just to send an email to info@jwbcompanies.com, you can set up a call. JWB team will walk you through it. Good stuff, GC. Man, as you know, we're now writing this newsletter that comes from the show of the media's part of the show. So I'm conscious about it. To me, those last 6 minutes right there is something I don't think we have ever addressed. The idea that how does each profit center pay me back? Normal. We talk about it all the time. Home price appreciation is the biggest one. The fact that which is the riskiest profit center to count on, we have never mentioned that before.
Yeah.
And we are so obsessed with cash flow. We're so obsessed with that part of it, which is really nice. It shows on the tool that if the cash flow is true, then it has this extra value of getting it this year versus in 20 years.
Yep.
Makes a lot of sense. The question is, are you betting on a team that has proven data and performance and processes and technology in place that paint a picture that makes you say, oh, you know what? I can believe that spreadsheet. Because at the end of the day, what we're just talking about, this idea of for 2 to 3 months before a tenant renews and for 2 to 3 months while they're the 2 months of the turn, it is not fun around the dinner table. I know I've lived it, right? So this idea of betting on the team, I thought that this was just going to clear up the IRR conversation, but what it's done for me is clear up the value of the team conversation in a very, very real way.
Yeah, no, I love that. We've always talked about the benefits of having net rental income.
Yeah.
We've called it it's risk mitigation, which it is when it's there, but it is the riskiest of the asset classes to actually be there.
Yeah.
Your tax savings are going to be there. Your principal pay down is going to be there. Home price appreciation over a full market cycle is predictable.
Yeah.
It is going to be there. Net rental income, well, that's determined by your team. And honestly, that drives your experience more than the others.
Yeah. Good stuff, man. All right.